Raider Nation, we got some breaking news, and unfortunately, it's not the breaking news that I wanted to be given to the entire nation. Ben Johnson has been stolen by the Chicago Bears, and he is now the new head coach for the Bears. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. This one really sucks. When you look at all the reports, when you look at all the information out there, I think everybody around the NFL right now is stunned that Ben Johnson decided to go to Chicago, and I think this is just one of those situations where it came down to the quarterback situation. The Raiders, based on what I was told, offered Johnson somewhere close to $15 million per year. I was even told somewhere close to $90 million guaranteed. I don't know exactly what the contract situation is going to end up looking like, but Chicago gave him a bag. And I really do wonder, at the end of that season, when the Raiders won against the Saints, when the Raiders won against the Jags, if you lose those two games and you have the number one overall pick, does that make this decision a little bit different? I don't know what it is, but here's what I do know. This came down to the wire. There was a lot of moving parts. The Raiders did a lot of things to try to bring Johnson in. I mean, they brought in his buddy, Lance Newmark, yesterday. They have 2 scheduled GM interviews today. They had their Rooney rules filled for GM and head coach. The Raiders tried to do everything in their power, and unfortunately, like we're used to, we came up a little bit short, and we got the L. The Bears got the win, and it sucks. But here's what we got to do now. We got to move on, right? And I told myself that I wouldn't get too upset if we lost Ben because 2.5 weeks ago, I stood up here on this show and I was like, there's no way in hell the Raiders are going to get Ben Johnson. There was a lot of rumors around it. We got our hopes up. But what I do want to know is this. How are y'all handling it? What is your one-word reaction to the Bears hiring Ben Johnson? And my one-word reaction to the very first thing that I said on my walk into work on Instagram Live at Mitchell Renz 365 was heartbroken. Like, it sucks, dude. I really thought that he was the top head coach for us. I thought that he aligned with a lot of the things that, the Raiders were looking for. But then here's the other part of it. The Raiders this offseason, I do think, have done a much better job at looking at qualified head coach candidates, have done a much better job at looking at qualified GM candidates, and they clearly have an idea of what they are trying to build. What I see this is Ben didn't align with the same things that the Raiders were trying to do, right? Like, if you look at a resume and you're looking at taking a job, the Raiders, when you lay out that resume, probably was one of the, worser situations unless you wanted a blank canvas, unless you wanted to be able to go out and pick your GM, go out and pick, your OC, your DC, all these extra things. And apparently, I think what Ben Johnson was looking for was really just a quarterback. And I think when you look at Caleb Williams, you can say what you want. Caleb Williams is a better quarterback situation than the Raiders have right now. When you look at all the good teams that are in the playoffs, you need a quarterback to win in the NFL. So here's how this is going to go. We got over 3,000 people here in the building. The only way you're going to get on this show is if you super chat, skip that line, because this is Disney World, y'all. And that fast pass gets you to the front of the line when you got the amount of questions that we have coming in right now. It's the only way I'm going to be able to get them up. Elijah says, can we get Deion? Maybe the Raiders can get Deion Sanders now. I think there's going to be a lot of moving parts, but Pete Carroll is probably the front runner. John, what up, dude? So is it Pete and Russell show in Vegas now? I do think that Pete Carroll is the front runner, but again, I think when you look at everything that was reported, not that you have to throw it out the window, but now we got to go back to the drawing board, and now you got to, if I'm the Raiders, now I'm trying to figure out, I would want to bring in Liam Coen for an interview. I would want to talk to Brian Flores for an interview. I would want to know the entire plan that is in place, but I would say right now, Pete Carroll is probably the most likely situation. Let's go to PG2869. What the F? We got sue it? I don't know what that means. This does feel a little bit like a situation last year with Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels. Hopefully it's a little bit better of a year, though, for the Raiders. What up, Daniel Meeker? Disappointed with Johnson, but not angry. He clearly went to the team with a young quarterback that has contract longevity. And he would have got contract longevity as well with the Las Vegas Raiders. I do think that is important. But again, he ended up picking the best quarterback available and in a division that he's familiar with. What if Ben thinks that the Lions aren't going to be as successful without him? Now he just wants to go compete in that division. It definitely sucks. We'll get into all of the news that you need to know around the Chicago Bears going out and hiring Ben Johnson. This is why you subscribe, because even when it's bad news, I'm a fan just like y'all. I want to be able to talk about it. But I do got to give a shout out to our sponsor, Game Time. The NFL playoffs are here, and they're all about bringing people together. Whether you're trying to have a good time in the year 2025, creating those lasting memories, I do think is important. Whether you're going to a sporting event, whether you're going to a comedy event, whether you're going to a music event, and after today, I might need some sweet jazz music to calm down a little bit. Maybe I need Ron Burgundy to play that sweet jazz for you. But take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, redeem code ChatSports for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Use code ChatSports for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. I think it's also time for the Raiders now to turn their attention, and now you got to turn that attention to being able to go out and finding a new head coach, right? Now, I will say this. If you are somebody that wants to try to go to the Natty tonight, I was looking at ticket prices, and they are insane. Like, they are, dude. They are insane. But if you were hypothetically wanted to use Game Time, it would be like the perfect time to wait until the last minute. And like now is when I would start looking at tickets for the Natty. Our other live sponsor here today is PrizePicks. And you can get $50 when you play 5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app out there, and the big game is almost here, and it's now or never. Also, one of the things that I love that PrizePicks is doing for the Natty tonight in the Ohio State Notre Dame game is you can get Will Howard at 0.5 passing yards. I hate to break it to you. Well, today's already enough of hate to break it to you. Will Howard's going to throw for more than 1 passing yard. You pick more, you pick less. PrizePicks.com/CLNS. Just make sure that you use code CLNS. That link's down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Daniel, I hear you, man. I'm disappointed as well. Y'all are watching the Raiders Report. We are breaking this down, and I am hearing this news a lot like y'all. When we get more updates, when we get some new updates, I will do my best here to be able to keep you up to date on everything going on around the Raiders and everything going on around this situation. Tony Williams, I've never been this excited. Well, Tony, congrats to you, man. I kind of hope it doesn't work out for you. I'm not going to lie, though. Yeah, and I get it. Like, I've been getting clowned on social media, and, you know, Bears fans, they're going to take their victory lap, and they're going to be excited to, you know, get that head coach. But you know what? Maybe there is a chance that he isn't that guy. Like, I don't know what it is. I would be surprised if Johnson does end up failing. But for Bears fans to clown Raiders fans on an organization, I don't know if y'all know this. We are very, very similar. But go celebrate y'all's win. I'm happy for y'all. I mean, I am. Like, I'm not mad at Bears fans. Like, we got a Bears guy here, Harrison. He's ecstatic, and he would have been ecstatic for me as well. I hope Chicago can win some football games because that's a diehard fan base. But when the Raiders play Chicago, yeah, I'm going to be rooting for the Raiders. What up, Chase? I need a drink. Yeah, I'm definitely not going to have anything to sip on until later on tonight when the Natty does end up get going, but I'm excited for watching that football game later on today. False Hope Mitch from MP. Thanks for supporting the show. Black Fabio, Raiders. Yeah, shit as usual. And I don't think that this is a fair thing to say. Like, I don't think that the mindset should be the Raiders suck. That's why we didn't get Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson did what was best for him. The Raiders, I think, actually did the right steps going forward to try to get him. Like, this would have never been even a conversation last year. This would have never been a conversation a few years ago. I think what you were at least seeing is that the Raiders are now going to be in the running for things that they wouldn't have been in the running before because of Tom Brady. And if they're already getting run right away in the first year that Brady's running the ship, what happens if the Raiders are good in a few years from now? I think you're going to see more and more teams, more and more players, more and more coaches want to have a little bit more interest to work with a guy like Tom Brady. Let's go to Pepe. Raiders will get their 3rd or 4th on the list. See, you say that, and I just don't. I think the number 2 guy on their list, nobody's going for, and Pete Carroll. So you could look at it a lot of different ways. But there are still good candidates like on the Raiders list. Like, I think Todd Monken is an outstanding coach. Who should be the Raiders' top option now as that Raiders head coach? Let me know down below. We're going to still interact with all of y'all. I do want to get into the news here like we kind of have been, and we're going to break everything down. But I see Sanders down there. I see Blinky, says Liam Coen. Like, I would like Liam Coen. I would like Todd Monken. I personally think that those are the top 2 candidates that I would look for if I was the Las Vegas Raiders. But then also, I was told that they could do a plan where they hire Pete Carroll, they hire Robert Saleh, they steal the Rams OC and make him the OC here because he's actually going to be the one calling plays instead of McVay. And because the LaFleur family and the Robert Saleh have such good ties, like, we still could build a very good coaching staff. Like, just because you miss out on your number 1 guy doesn't mean that it's the end of the world, right? Like, we could also be sitting here in a situation where the Chicago Bears think that they're getting the better quarterback in Caleb Williams when actually they should have taken Jaden Daniels, right? Like, you don't know. There's so many things that can happen, but I'm not going to sit up here and act like I'm not upset. I wanted Ben Johnson. Hell, I bought a Ben Johnson Raiders jersey already, and it's going to come in next week. Now it just seems a little bit weird, man. It really does. Aaron Glenn from Raider Willie, that one's probably not going to happen. I see him either taking the Saints or the Jets job there. TF says Pete is too old. Pete's 73 years old. But I also will say sometimes you don't got to look at the age. You got to look at how they act, and Pete's one of the youngest 73-year-olds out there. But also, like, you know, who'd you vote for? Because there's a lot of old people running the country as well. Gruden from Juan, that would be a disaster. Megalodon says Cliff Kingsbury. Well, I mean, what Cliff's doing right now in the Commanders is going to get a lot of attention. And I know the Raiders tried to go out and get him before, but is Cliff more of just a OC and somebody that's not built to be a head coach? That remains to be seen. I see RJ says Liam Coen or Brian Flores. Again, both really solid options for the Las Vegas Raiders. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get into a cut here. It's going to be about 10, 15 minutes going over everything that there is to know about the Bears hiring Ben Johnson and what the Raiders could potentially do moving forward. We still have more interviews to look at. We still have more GM things to look at. But I really, truly believe when it was all said and done, Ben Johnson took the Bears job because of Caleb Williams. Because outside of that, there's no other reason why I would see why you would go that route unless it's just Caleb Williams there. What do you got for me? Yep. Cool. Sounds good. Cool. All right, y'all. We're about to get into this cut right here. If you want to get questions, comments, it's going to be an instant reaction to the news as I am taking this in right now as well. For the next 10 to 15, we're going to be doing a cut here around Ben Johnson. We have some NFL breaking news, and the Chicago Bears have hired Ben Johnson. There was a lot of speculation and a lot of rumors that the Raiders were the front runners to be able to go out and get the Lions offensive coordinator, but unfortunately, they fell a little bit short. I'm Mitchell Renz, host of the Raiders Report, and unlike a lot of Raiders fans out there, I'm heartbroken right now. I feel like it's a little bit of a kick in the nuts, but coming up here on today's show, I'm going to tell you why Johnson picked the Bears over the Raiders, where the Raiders now are kind of looking in terms of head coach, GM, and then at the very end of today's show, I'm just going to show you how Raider Nation is reacting to the news of BJ now in Chicago. Now, I got to ask, though, because this show is an interactive show, and I got to know on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset are you right now that Johnson is not going to be the Raiders head coach? 1, you're not upset at all. 10, you're absolutely devastated. For me personally, I'm going to put it at a 7 or an 8 because I am extremely heartbroken. But I also, 2 weeks ago, said, I don't think that Johnson's going to get the job. I'm happy that we were even in the consideration of getting it. I'm happy that Ben Johnson took the time to even talk to the Raiders and Tom Brady, because when you look at a resume, we all knew it. The Raiders don't have a great resume for a brand new head coach, especially the top guy out there when you don't have a quarterback. I'll admit, I would love to know what his decision would have been if the Raiders had the number 1 overall pick if you don't win those 2 meaningless games in New Orleans and that other meaningless game at Jacksonville. Because quite frankly, I think when you hear a lot of the things that are out there, He really took this Bears job because of Caleb Williams, because of this quarterback situation. Look at the NFL playoffs right now. All these teams have legit quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. You got Patrick Mahomes. All these teams that went far were because of the quarterback play, and that was the biggest question mark around the Raiders, and Ben is obviously going to get a fat paycheck. The Raiders, according to sources that I talked to, were somewhere around $15 million per year for Johnson. They were willing to offer him somewhere like 5 for 75, 6 for 90, fully guaranteed, and Johnson decided to take another gig. I know everything that Raiders fans were hoping for, but I also am going to sit up here and say, yes, I am sad, but also it's just the simple fact of I really never thought Ben Johnson was going to be the Raiders head coach 2 weeks ago. I got excited, and this morning I thought Ben Johnson was going to be the head coach. Yesterday, I thought Ben Johnson was going to be the Raiders head coach, and it was really kind of looking like there was a lot of smoke, and it was going to lead to the Raiders being able to get Johnson. I don't know if something changed in the last 24 hours, but we do got to say that the Raiders tried. I think they put their best foot forward. They did what good organizations do. They figured out what candidates Ben Johnson would want. They brought in his buddy yesterday, Lance Newmark, on an interview. They are ready to hire a head coach or a GM. They have satisfied both of the Rooney rules in terms of 2 in-person interviews with GM and head coach, so the Raiders can go out and they can hire a head coach and go out and hire a GM. They tried. They really, really did. But he ended up taking one interview or one in-person interview, and that just ended up being Chicago. He flew there, but the deal was already done before he even landed. They ended up getting their head coach. So this was a list that I put together probably last week when a lot of the information started to come in, and I know Deion's on this list, and I'll tell you this. I almost wonder if the new Deion conversations get to be reopened because I think the door was shut so quickly on Sanders because the Raiders just wanted to be able to show, hey, Ben, we're all in on you, and that's the only guy that we're on. The other names, though, Pete Carroll, I would say, is the new front runner to get the job. The name that I would love for the Raiders to talk to, there's 2 of them, Todd Monken, Liam Coen, 2 young. Coen's a young offensive mind. Monken's older, but he's an offensive-minded guy. He's gotten the best version out of Lamar Jackson over the past 2 seasons. He did a great job in Georgia for 3 years calling plays there. Todd Monken's a name. Though, if they end up building a staff, I could see it being Pete Carroll. And, again, based on one of the conversations that I had, they could bring in somebody like Robert Saleh as a DC. And then when Pete Carroll decides to, hang it up because he's 73, you just give the keys to the car to Robert Saleh. One of the very first GM candidates the Raiders brought in was Eric Sullivan. He's with Green Bay. Good friends with Saleh. Good friends with the LaFleur family. Saleh's good friends with the LaFleur family. I almost wonder if the Raiders could bring in LaFleur, the offensive coordinator for the Rams, because he's not calling plays over there for Sean McVay, and he could call plays here for the Raiders. A lot of moving parts, a lot of news to be able to break down. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on because there will be, and I mean this, a lot of moving parts around the Raiders, around the NFL here in the next 24 to 48 hours. So coming up next here, let's look at how the nation reacts because that's why I love doing this show. Even when bad news happens, you're the only people that I want to talk to. You're the only people that I want to vent to. I was taking Chuck out for a walk, and I got the update. Chugs called me, and I said, I'll be there as quick as I can. Let's talk about it. Because I am a believer, you need to vent. You need to be able to get out those frustrations. But I don't think that this should be the Raiders lost Ben Johnson. I think the Bears won Ben Johnson. We put our best foot forward. We came up a little bit short. But you know what? The Bears took Caleb Williams, and maybe they should have taken Jaden. The Raiders, what if we end up getting that second guy, and it ends up being the proper choice? No matter what, I am going to be confident that the new Raiders head coach is an improvement over Antonio Pierce. And I am confident that the new Raiders GM is going to be better than Tom Telesco. And all you can ask every single offseason, did you get better? The Raiders will get better this offseason. So before we get into all the crazy reactions here from the nation, today's show is sponsored by Game Time. And I know the playoffs are here, and the playoffs are all about bringing people together. And it's one of the reasons why I want y'all to go get started with Game Time, because Game Time is focused on bringing people together in 2025 and creating those lasting memories. You might not always remember the score, but you're going to remember all those awesome experiences that you had, whether it's a comedy event, whether it is a baseball game, football game, basketball game, and also Game Time's got a brand new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. If you are somebody that was like Mitch, I was thinking about going to the Natty, but the tickets are expensive. The tickets are extremely expensive. That's what happens when you got Notre Dame and Ohio State, two very, very big fan bases. But if you were to think about getting tickets for a Raiders game, think about tickets for the Natty, download the Game Time app, create an account, Chat Sports, $20 off, and just watch how much those ticket prices will drop the closer and closer and closer that game gets. Now, it might be a little bit different for the Natty compared to a normal football game, but download Game Time. I promise you it's going to be the best place to get those tickets. So, let's see how Raider Nation is reacting to the news of the Bears going out and hiring Ben Johnson. It's a cold day here where I live, and walking in, I felt like I was walking through Chicago. It was a tough one, man. Let's go to Malachi. Really don't care. Next up, Pete or Sanders. And honestly, I think this is the mindset that the nation needs to have. You can't dwell on what ifs at this point. You can't dwell on, Ben Johnson. It's how the NFL works. Time to move on. Time to get your sights, now on a different direction. And if it's Pete Carroll, I am just okay with the idea that no matter what, we did get better this offseason. Let's go to midnight. Brady. He's going with them MFers. He's probably not happy that Ben Johnson ended up taking the Chicago job, but I also think that he understands where this world is. They have a quarterback. The Raiders don't. Let's go to Strike Gaming, another rookie head coach. Is that what we wanted again? I think what people got to stop looking at is it just a rookie head coach, or is it making an improvement at the head coaching position? If Antonio Pierce was a quarterback, we would talk about AP at a QB level much worse than the way that I talk about Aiden O'Connell now. I would say the way Antonio Pierce performed as a head coach is the same way that a guy like Gardner Minshew performed on the field. You wouldn't want to roll it back with Minshew because he was that bad, just like you shouldn't want to roll it back again with Antonio Pierce after how bad he was this past year. I know what Jaden's doing. I know what Cliff Kingsbury's doing, but we also were unable to get those guys. And yes, he was given a bad hand, but he didn't play that hand well. Miguel, with Johnson and Vrabel off the board, who are your top 5 coaches to watch, and what college coach could be a possibility other than Sanders? I actually think that the only possible coach is Deion Sanders coming out of college. From there on out, the top 5 guys that I would say are Pete Carroll. Steve Spagnuolo is a sneaky name to watch, and he's a Chiefs guy, but it's just the name that I'm going to throw out there. I would want Todd Monken. I would want Liam Coen. Those would be some other names that I would throw out there as well. But we've interviewed Vance Joseph. And then Robert Saleh, I don't think is the head coach that the Raiders would hire. But I could see them hiring him as a DC to then take over Pete Carroll once Pete Carroll decides to leave in a year, 2, maybe 3 years down the line. My question, though, is this. Who should be the Raiders' top option to be that head coach? We were all in on Ben Johnson here on this show. We were all in on BJ. Now that that's the fact, who should the Raiders be looking at? If it was up to me, and if I was the one calling the shots, it would be Todd Monken and it would be Liam Coen. I think the Raiders, though, are going to look at a guy like Pete Carroll. Let's go to Kennedy Films. Which quarterback gives us the best chance to make the playoffs? We got to find a head coach. You got to find a GM. You got to find an OC and DC, and then we'll worry about going to the playoffs and getting a quarterback. I would say right now the Raiders' top option for a QB is Shedeur Sanders, and that hasn't changed. Let's go to the Ghost of the Navigator. This team is cursed. See, you can't say the Raiders are cursed and then also say that the Bears aren't cursed, right? The Bears have never had a quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards. I don't like the word cursed. I think it's just this is a poorly run organization, but the Commanders showed in 1 year you can flip the script, and it can happen. And if I'm the Raiders, I'm looking at what Washington did, and I'm trying to copy it. Let's go to Joseph Perry. Again, man, thank you so much for supporting the show. Boz, Definitely a little disappointed, especially after waking up and reading the SI report on the Raiders getting close with Johnson. It was rumored 6 years, $90 million, next coach Coen and Spytek. I still think John Spytek is a legit candidate to be this next GM. And then the other name that I'll throw out there is Ed Dodds. Ed Dodds has got a lot of Raiders connections. Ed Dodds has a lot of Jet Hughes connections. Ed Dodds has a lot of Pete Carroll connections. So because of those names, I would say they're to keep in mind. Coen for head coach, Spytek though for GM. I like that pairing as well. Let's go to Steve. What up, man? Goff's performance is why Ben would go coach a quarterback like Caleb/Drake. Jaden, cool, calm demeanor, won that game. We need Cam Ward for our specific situation. If you told me right now that we miss out on Ben Johnson, but we get Cam Ward, I'm okay with that situation. I love Cam Ward. I think he's an unbelievable quarterback. He's my favorite quarterback in this year's draft. I don't think Goff's performance has anything to do with anything in that regard, but I will say this. When you watch how talented Caleb Williams is, and when you watch how bad that Bears team is, isn't it a little bit interesting that Bears team was as bad as what they were? I know Matt Eberflus was bad. I get it. But I'm wondering if Ben Johnson a few years from now is going to go, shit, I don't know if I should have taken that Chicago job. John, do not hire the Seagulls' old coach, so Pete Carroll. It's not me making the decision. If it was up to me, I wouldn't hire Pete Carroll. But if the Raiders do hire Pete Carroll, I'm not going to be mad about it. Carroll is a good head coach. Pete Carroll is an upgrade over what we had. And every offseason, you got to improve free agency, trades, draft, and even coaches. And the Raiders will do all of that this offseason. Noah. Upset, yes. Surprise, no. We were not favored because one reason quarterback. This also means we will not get a quarterback in round one, in my opinion. I don't know if the last part there impacts it at all. I still think the Raiders are going to try to go all in on that quarterback situation. But when you look at what the Raiders tried to do today, right, like they interviewed Brandon Brown, assistant GM of the New York Giants, somebody who was rumored to love Shedeur Sanders. I think that when you look at Deion's comments from last week, he said a couple of teams that he didn't want Shedeur to go for. I think Deion is a very smart man, and when you say couple, that's two. That to me says Titans, Browns. Figure out what the Giants were thinking about Shedeur. I still think the Raiders try to move up and go get him. Let's go to Mike. Pete's been coaching since the 70s. No thanks. I know he's been coaching a long time, and I know he's 73 years old. Donovan, Bears suck more. Bears eat corn sideways. No butter. Bade, I know you hate it, but at this point, F it. Bring back lackluster when we have finally be our turn for someone good to happen. Wait. I see two different ones. Oh, it's Gruden. Yeah, bringing back Gruden doesn't make any sense. You'd have to pay him again. Like, why am I going to pay John Gruden again when he wasn't good at his job to begin with? He didn't have a winning record. I know that the Raiders were winning games in that final season. I know what it looked like. But for a team that's got a lot of money in free agency, a lot of draft picks, a lot of big decisions to make on roster construction, I'm not going to allow Gruden. If you want to bring Gruden back as a QB coach, fine. I don't want him as an OC, and you don't want him as a head coach. It doesn't make sense. He was bad at his job. Let's go to Daniel. What up, Daniel? Man, what a disappointment. Any head coach hire now will be lackluster when we finally be our turn for something good to happen. Something good will happen. And, and I knew that if we got our hopes up this much around Ben and he ended up taking another job, it would hurt like this. And, it hurts like this because of how bad that Raiders season was. When you're as bad as what this Raiders season went, you want to be able to celebrate something in the offseason. And it kind of felt like everything was going our way for the first time, right? Like, you get all these reports, and nobody really thought Ben Johnson was going to come to the Raiders. And then all of a sudden, it became a real possibility. And then, the hope started to build. And I think that hope build because after a year like you go through, where it doesn't work with a head coach that a lot of people wanted to work in AP, and it doesn't go the way that you're hoping that it goes, and it's as bad as what it was, you want it to be able to get turned around. And I'm hurting too, man. Believe me when I tell you this. I am hurting too. But there are so many other good coaching candidates out there, like even like a guy like Mike McCarthy. I think Mike McCarthy is an outstanding head coach who was in a bad situation with Jerry Jones. Mike McCarthy's got a 600 record, you know what I mean, like as a coach. That deserves to be looked at. Raider Biggs, in pathetic Raiders fashion, the Raiders weren't aggressive enough to get the guy like in last year's draft. So this is two things. One, the report from Schefter saying that the Raiders never tried to trade up for Jaden Daniels. I'm just telling y'all that's just not true. The Raiders did. They tried it. And I personally think Pierce's team leaked that out to Schefter, and Schefter's got a pass to putting out false information that he's been given. Like the Condoleezza Rice story is one of my favorite of all time. And then I don't think it has anything to do with them not being aggressive. The Raiders were extremely aggressive. It just came down to this, like, even if they offered the exact same money, you would actually make more money in Las Vegas. It just came down to quarterback, where if you're somebody that, you wanted the Ferrari and the Raiders are offering you a Honda that maybe you can figure out a way and they're going to buy any car you want. But if you grew up and you wanted the Ferrari and you think Caleb Williams is that Ferrari, I don't think that has anything to do with the Raiders not trying. I think it's just the decision Ben Johnson made came down to quarterback, and it came down to quarterback alone. Nico, Raiders reporters that led us down this path of thinking he was in the bag should get fired. Ben went and signed with the Bears the first day that he could. I don't think that this is fair either, and I say that simply because the Raiders beat reporters also are going to take the information that they're given, just like I am going to talk about the information that I am given. I'll also always say this, and this is just the cold hard fact. When you go through the amount of changes that the Raiders have gone through from top to bottom, coaches, it is hard to get sources because they change every week. It's also why I say, you got to take Raiders beat reporters with a grain of salt. I'm not a beat reporter. I don't try to be a beat reporter. I'm a Raiders fan that when I see information out there, I relay it to you. When I get information that's told to me, I relay it to you. And the information that Raiders beat reporters were getting was the exact same information that I was getting. Go look at the NFL circles right now. Diana Rossini tweeted, she's shocked. Like, something happened, I think, literally in the last 24 hours where the ball started to get rolling in favor again of Chicago, and it can change very quickly in that regard. Like, what if the Bears offered him $25 million per year, fully guaranteed? Like, I don't know what the details of this contract are yet, and we'll find out what it is. But I don't think it's fair to call for Raiders beat reporters' jobs because in the NFL, things change all the time just like that. It's just an unfortunate situation. But reminder, subscribe for coaching news, rumors, updates, all that kind of good stuff. Chugs and I are going to be live later on tonight for Notre Dame and Ohio State. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I need y'all to show up because I need a smile on my face. And if you're like, you know what, Mitch, I need a smile on my face too. I didn't plan on getting as crazy as what I was gonna because I was like always going to be on our Ben Johnson watch. After today, I'm going balls to the wall on that freaking watch party tonight because I need to smile a little bit. And if you are just watching this randomly, we're going to stay live here. We're going to answer questions probably until about 6 p.m. Eastern time, and then I'm going to jet on out of here. So don't go anywhere to the 4,200 people that are still here rocking with Jeremy Chugs and I. All right, y'all. Yes or no, are you shocked he chose the Bears? Shout out to Jeremy. They've been hearing a lot from me, Chugs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think even amongst the Chat Sports office, like our Bears guy couldn't believe it.
Yeah. So if you want to hear my opinion on it, on what I think happened over the last 24 hours, I think it's plain and simple, Mitch.
Yep.
What happened in the past 24 hours to Ben Johnson? He lost a playoff, or I guess the past 48 hours. He lost a playoff game. And he lost it to Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
And when you're looking at being a head coach, who are head coaches mostly tied to? Your quarterback. And if he's looking at it and saying, if I only have one shot, if I only have one opportunity to be a head coach, am I going with Caleb Williams or Aiden O'Connell /
whoever?
Question mark.
Yeah.
I'm choosing Caleb Williams. And I think a lot of the times everybody was, confused of like, why would he choose the Raiders over the Bears and everything like that. And I know he probably molded it over in his head. And I think maybe losing to Jaden Daniels might have been that, you know what? Jared Goff isn't a bad quarterback. Jared Goff is a good quarterback in that instance.
Yep.
Is he a top 5 quarterback? Does he have the ability to be an MVP level quarterback? I think there's that separating factor where he goes, we lost to an amazing quarterback.
Yeah.
I need an amazing quarterback.
Yeah.
Raiders don't have that. And I think that's the final straw that broke the camel's back in Ben Johnson not being the Raiders' next head coach.
Yep.
And that he lost to a great quarterback, and he goes, you know what? I need a great quarterback.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that take at all. I also think, you got to look at the AFC West. You got to look at the NFC North, where Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs, they're not going to be bad. Like, they're not going anywhere. You got Bo Nix, who's going to be entering his second year with Sean Payton. And you got Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert.
To everybody that is Team AOC, that was Team No Tank, we're okay at quarterback, like we're good.
I really think that winning those 2 games might have cost you Ben Johnson. Let's be honest with ourselves. Because if you have the number 1 overall pick, and then even if you don't want a QB,
Rusty,
you could still trade out of it.
I don't know why you're telling me to grow a pair. This isn't what my decision was. I'm giving you an insight on to why Ben Johnson probably chose the Bears. And Rusty Code or anybody who is upset at this decision, I ask you, what would you do? If you were offered a job opportunity and there was 2 companies and one of them had a great benefits package and had a lot more security,
sure,
you'd be like, I'd probably go to that job.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what they're looking at. We also don't know what the Bears offered him, right? Like, what if the Bears offered him a John Gruden type deal? Like, what if he got a 10-year, $200 million deal fully guaranteed? Until we see these contract details, I don't know what they are, but what we do know is this. The Bears have a quarterback. The Raiders don't. Yeah. And it is an unfortunate situation. What I will say is this, though. What I'm not going to stand for today, Rusty, I know you're a loyal watcher. I'm not going to stand for people acting like children in our chat, yelling at Jeremy and I. We're upset. I'm upset. Jeremy's upset, too, that we didn't get Ben Johnson. We're not happy about the situation.
And the thing is,
but what I'm not going to stand for is that.
There's a lot of Raider fans out there. There's a lot of diehards.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have the choice to turn off the TV, and you have the choice to not watch this game. In mine and Mitch's profession, we don't have that opportunity. We watch every second of every single Raiders game all year long. So if you don't think me and Mitch wanted to watch a better product out there and watch a better offensive scheme and a better offensive...
You think I like watching Luke Getsy and Josh McDaniels?
We want the Raiders to be good more than anybody.
Bro, we did a Ben Johnson watch party, right? I wanted it to happen, and I hear y'all. I really, really do. But I think what we got to do, and I don't want this to happen because I felt for a week and a half, the nation was very together. And I don't want us not getting Ben Johnson to now turning against each other again, because I don't think that that's going to result in good things happening for, a lot of Raiders fans. I do this show to have a good time, to be happy. I saw somebody say, you guys only do it because you get paid. I mean, you got to remember, we did this for years before we got paid, right? Just because we do it now and it's our full-time job, there was many, many times where, I was making $30 a month.
Mitch was writing articles in his basement. I went to school for 4 years for journalism and was outside in 10-degree weather covering high school football.
Everybody takes a different path, but let's not get it twisted here. I'm upset. Chugs is upset. Y'all are upset, but we're all upset because we're Raiders fans and we want what's best for the Raiders. Yeah. And we want to be able to win and we want to be able to watch him. We also know how much time, effort, money that we all invest into this team, and we want certain things to happen. I also say this. I was super excited when the Raiders hired Antonio Pierce, and look how that happened. Yeah. We don't know how things end up shaking out. So all I ask is this. Please be respectful, Rusty, and the entire nation out there. Let's keep some questions moving here.
We have a ton of super chats that we still have to get to. So if Mitch goes a little quick, sorry, there's literally 40 super chats in a row, and usually we try to do some hashtag Raiders, but in today's show, there's just so many questions lined up. And then we also have to get ready. We're going to be going live later on for the national title game.
For the Natty.
So we're getting some help on the back end, but please be patient. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions.
Yep.
We'll get to all the super chats. Just let Mitch answer all of them. And me and Mitch, we haven't even ordered dinner yet. So let us know. What should we get to eat? I was thinking Chinese food?
Bro, you can get anything you want at this point. The Telesco firing was unnecessary. I don't actually agree with this. I still think that the Telesco firing was the right thing to do if you're the Raiders, because they brought in a guy like Jed Hughes and they cared about what Jed had to say. They also are trying to build something totally different. And I think because they're trying to build something totally different, they have an idea of what they have in mind. And I think what they're trying to build is what the Commanders did. So I think firing Telesco, calling it unnecessary, that's not the right mindset. The mindset is the Raiders have a plan. And I would rather go into an offseason with a clear plan than just shooting from the hip, which I feel like Mark Davis usually does. Let's go to the last Mandalore. I think I'd rather see Flores get a chance than put too much into a big name. I think Flores is a hell of a coach. And to be honest, I think he kind of got the short end of the stick in Miami, where when you look at how bad that roster was before he took over, I mean, they were outscored. It was almost a record by how many points they were outscored the first year he took over. And then they were actually turned into a pretty good football team. Yes, he has a lot of ties. Yes, he's a good defensive-minded coach, though the Raiders have not put in a request to interview Brian Flores. Like, they also haven't put in a request to interview Liam Coen, two candidates that were getting some mentions early on. And I do wonder now, because the Raiders did not get Ben Johnson, if we see some of these names start to pop up here a little bit more. It'll be interesting. David's on. I see ya. Salute to you, my man. Thanks for pulling up today. Reminder, hashtag Raiders or Super Chat. Get those questions on. I'm just going to tell you this. The only way you're going to be able to get on at this point is a super. Let's go get Sanders family. That's the only way we're going to get a quarterback. And that's not true either. You can trade up and get a QB. You can sign somebody in free agency. I will say this. I am impressed by what Deion Sanders has been able to do and build at Colorado, at Jackson State. But then, let's also be real. If his name's not Deion Sanders, if you were to just look at his resume, you wouldn't hire him, right? And what I don't think that the Raiders need is to bring in somebody, and then it's just you're only bringing him in because of his ties with his son. That doesn't also, I think, fully align for what they're trying to do. But I do think that now they might revisit the Deion conversation. They might. I don't know. Nico. To all the fans that celebrated another 2 meaningless wins, this is another result. And I would say, to the fans out there, if you're mad about Ben Johnson, then hopefully you were not celebrating the 2 meaningless wins. Because I do think that those 2 meaningless wins are another big reason of why we did not get Ben Johnson today. The number 1 overall pick is way more appealing than the number 6 pick. Jersey Boy Greaser. Ben chose the Bears for one reason. Caleb Williams, just please no Coach Prime and bring in Carroll. He's got plenty of big wins under his belt. Carroll does have a lot of big wins under his belt. I will tell you this, our Seahawks guys said that we wouldn't want Carroll, that he's very outdated at this point, and that's a very reasonable thing to say. Coaches do get outdated. Their philosophies can get outdated, right? That stuff does happen. But I will say, at this point now, it can't just be head coach. Now what we got to look at is, all right, what's the best trio? Head coach, DC, OC. Because if you bring in Pete Carroll, you bring in a Mike LaFleur, the OC of the Rams, and give him play calling duties, and you bring in a Robert Saleh at DC, I'm going to sit back and I'm going to go Pete Carroll, Mike LaFleur, and then also Robert Saleh. Those are 3 outstanding coaches to help get the ball rolling, because the Commanders showed you it's not just bringing in the right head coach. It's bringing in the right GM and a guy like Adam Peters. It's bringing in a dude like Lance Newmark. It's like bringing in an offensive coordinator like Cliff Kingsbury. You got to do those other things right, too. Let's go to German. McDaniels wants his job back. McDaniels might get a job in New England, calling plays over there. So I'm good on McDaniels. Let McDaniels get another job elsewhere, and I think the only place that would ever hire him again is the New England Patriots. But I'm good on that one. Keep them coming here. We got Fife. Sad, but not surprised. Thanks for all you do, Mitch Fife. I feel you, man. Loss. It never made sense to hire Ben Johnson. I disagree. I think when you look at what he's been able to cook up from an offensive skill point, I know that everybody wants to be able to hire somebody with a resume. I want to try to find the next Sean McVay. I want to try to find that next young coach that's already ahead of his time, and you can lock him in for long term. That's just the way I think Ben Johnson is going to operate, and he's going to operate that way in Chicago. I mean, we'll see what he ends up doing, but also one of the things I didn't want a head coach that called all the shots. One of the things that I talked about of why I originally didn't think Johnson was going to get it is because Johnson's going to be able to call all the shots, and he's not going to take a back seat to Tom Brady. Brady's going to have a say. And maybe Johnson didn't want to have to listen to anybody, and he wanted to be able to come in there and call all the shots, which does make me nervous. And, well, it doesn't make me nervous anymore. Diana Rossini, she literally just tweeted, Ben Johnson picked the Bears because of the quarterback. It's that simple. Jacob Thompson, how can you pretend Pete Carroll is a good option? Are you talking to me? I mean, Pete Carroll's not the option I want. I think the only reason why Pete Carroll is a good option is because he has a lot of coaching experience and because they would bring in a very good staff. Again, if I'm going based off of what I told, now don't get me wrong, a lot of the stuff that I was told now is very, very different, but I was told Pete Carroll and Robert Saleh could be a package deal, and it could be one of the reasons why Saleh is also one of those candidates that did interview last week after Pete Carroll interviewed. So, like, Pete Carroll by himself, not a good option. If you bring in the right regime around him, can be the right option. Jose, yes, I am disappointed on Johnson, but going with Carroll, I think would be a better option overall fit. Carroll is a culture setter, and we need that. And you're not wrong in saying that. Like, the Raiders do need to be able to build a good culture. In Seattle, the reason why they were successful for almost a decade was because of that culture that they were able to build. And, you know, they built that on the defensive side of the football. And they were able to go out and they were able to find a quarterback in Russell Wilson, and they were able to paint that picture together. Like, Russell Wilson was the perfect mentality for that Seahawks team back then. You need to be able to find that marriage between quarterback, leader, captain, OC, DC. I do think Carroll is going to be an upgrade over Antonio Pierce. And whatever we do this offseason is an upgrade over, I think, what the Raiders would have done with AP and with Tom Telesco. We got $108 million in salary cap. This does make it a little bit more interesting on a guy like Max Crosby. I'll be curious to see what happens with him, no doubt about it. Oh, man, we got 3,800 people here. If you feel like you got kicked in the nuts, click that like button, because I do. I feel like I got kicked in the nuts when I got the update today that Ben Johnson just accepted the job with the Chicago Bears. But if you're the Raiders, you got to look forward and you got to keep on moving on. I don't want a DC head coach. I want a strong OC to be the head coach. Liam Coen is the top candidate now. Go with the young youth movement. Stop with the retired hires. I love Liam Coen as well. And I think, you know, John Spytek, Liam Coen, you put that pairing together, and that's a recipe for success. But the Raiders have yet to put in an actual interview request for Liam Coen. It was just somebody that was reported that they would have interest in. Carter, I'm still neutral on it. Got to trust the process. And that's all you can do at this point. You can trust the process. You can look at a lot of different things. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a quarterback, you can't get mad at Ben Johnson for taking the job. Like, what job would you have taken? If you were to just look at both resumes and not have Raiders slapped on one and Bears slapped on the other, you probably would have taken the Bears job as well because it's the more appealing job because of the quarterback. Like, I know how we feel because we're Raiders fans, and we would have taken that Raiders job. But if I were to just show you blank resume, I think most people here probably would have taken that Bears job as well. Let's go to Alan Rader. This team is going nowhere. Same old song. Pete Carroll will be another retread. Who wants that? Oh, that's right. The Raiders do. What a joke. And to the people that are saying retread, sometimes you need a fresh start. Sometimes you need a little bit of a fresh air, right? Like, look at Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn was a head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Ends up getting a new start. Had to go be a DC for a little while down there in Dallas. And then got another opportunity in Washington. And he was able to go out and get the right guys to put around him. You put Pete Carroll with Ed Dodds, I think that that's a good pairing. A lot of times in the NFL, you got to be lucky to be good. You also have to bring in the right guys at the top that think the exact same way that you do. I don't like the word retread because you can win in the NFL when you go other places. It happens all the flipping time, man. Look at Bill Belichick. Look at Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll is a great example. He was somebody that was like, he stinks. Then he goes, win Super Bowl with Seattle. So much stuff changes. Sean, I can't wait for Caleb Williams to still suck, even with BJ as their head coach. Next man up mentality. Let's go Raiders. And what if Ben Johnson and Caleb don't mesh well together? Like, what if Caleb and Ben prove to not be a good mixture? What if we end up getting a better candidate in the long run? Like, there's still a lot of unknowns. And I'm going to look at this glass half full because after the year we all just went through, I think you're doing yourself a disservice to not look at it half full. It's the offseason. You're a Raiders fan. You might as well be excited about it. Rusty, Ben Johnson is a loser and caved to the NFL and public pressure. Maybe he did, right? Maybe he thought that there was going to be more pressure on him if he took the job with the Las Vegas Raiders, and maybe there would have been. I could also say this, though. If Ben Johnson is confident that maybe he's the reason that him and Aaron Glenn were the reason why they were winning in Detroit instead of Dan Campbell, what if you're sitting there going, I can now be the head coach of Chicago. The Lions are going to take a step back because they're losing both their coordinators. Will the Packers get better? Maybe. Yes or no? I don't know. I think the Vikings are going to take a step back because I just don't see them being that good yet again. With a new quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, is he better than Sam Darnold? I don't know. But I can also paint a clearer picture winning in the NFC than I can paint a picture of winning in the AFC. What would you rather go through? Would you rather go through Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen? Or would you rather go through Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, and Matthew Stafford? I don't know what the name is, right? The AFC's got a lot more talent, let's just be honest. It's a lot tougher to get to the Super Bowl through the AFC. Rubio, how do you feel about the Notre Dame head coach? I think he's a great head coach. But why would if I'm Notre Dame, why would I leave the Notre Dame job for the Raiders job? Because I make an argument that Notre Dame job is a better job than the Raiders job. You can make an argument Alabama, Georgia, better than the Raiders job. When you look at those schools and how much money that those coaches get, and honestly in college coaches, I think are looked at as almost like more of the program than like the coaches in like the NFL, where, these kids go to Notre Dame to play with coaches. Like these kids go to certain destinations to play with those head coaches. But I make an argument that the Notre Dame head job has got way more job security and is a better job than the Raiders head coaching job. So I don't think he's going anywhere. Let's go to Jimbo Mack. You think the Raiders are more likely to go with Coach Prime and draft Sanders than they were last week? Yes. I think there is a better chance now that the Raiders could be more interested in Dion. And I think one of the reasons why they were so quick to say no to Dion was because they were like, all right, if we put all of our focus on Ben Johnson and Johnson knows how much we want him, well, then maybe there's a better chance of us getting him. Now anything's possible. You could have a mystery box, and there could even be a boat inside of that mystery box. You know what's something that's never a mystery? That PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app out there. You pick more, you pick less. It's really that simple. And the big game is almost here, so it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with PrizePicks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. PrizePicks is also giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. Check out the promos tab to tail any of our Super Sweet Millie winners' big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Also, the Natty is tonight. You got Notre Dame and you got Ohio State. Will Howard, half of a passing yard. You can go with the more there. Chug says let's go less on Riley Leonard passing yards, and then Jeremiah Smith less on 80.5 receiving yards. I know Notre Dame likes to play man, but I don't know if Notre Dame's ever gone up against an offense like this Ohio State one with Jeremiah Smith. Overall, I'm kind of with Chugs here. I kind of like the less on Leonard and Smith, and if that Will Howard more doesn't, this is going to be the craziest national championship game of all time. PrizePicks, I love it, and I think you guys will too. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today. Use code CLNS. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. Let's go to Rich Wolf. Dude, I'm crying. No BJ in Vegas, just a bust. Yeah, Rich, my balls are the color of that super chat you just sent in. Angel, what up, dude? What does this mean about keeping Crosby? I'm not going to speculate on anything around Max. I talked to Max and his team last week, and Max wants to be a Raider. He wants to make sure that whatever, coaches that the Raiders decide to bring in matches what he wants. Tomorrow's going to be another big day for Max, I think, because Patrick Graham's going to have an opportunity to get that Bengals DC job, and it's between him and then, what's the Notre Dame DC's name? Al Golden. I think Al Golden is the one that's the front runner for that job. What? And, yeah, Irish. But, Al Golden, I think, is the front runner for that Bengals job. Who knows? Maybe the Raiders decide to bring back Patrick Graham. I don't know the situation. Christopher, I think the next Dan Campbell is Marcus Freeman. I don't think Marcus Freeman's leaving Notre Dame. The only way if I'm Marcus Freeman that I'm leaving Notre Dame is if I get the job at the Dallas Cowboys. And you get the job at the Cowboys and Jerry's I'm not going to do anything, which is never going to happen. Rusty, Ben has walked the plank before. He became a Raider, and he's fired. He's toast. Out of my mind. See you later, loser. And I think this is the mentality you need to have, where you can't miss something if you never had it. Yeah, it's a nice idea, and don't get me wrong, man. We were excited, and I really did. I really thought that he was going to be the next head coach of the Raiders. I'm serious, right? But at this point now, I'm not upset about it because it never even happened to begin with. Oh, what up, dude? Gruden took the Raiders to the playoffs recently. His scheme did. AOC would thrive in. His offense, look what Carr did. I feel like I've answered these questions enough. I don't know what year you're talking about that Gruden took the Raiders to the playoffs, because Gruden didn't take the Raiders to the playoffs, so I think you're just living in your own little world right now. Maybe this is John Gruden's burner. What up, Legend Smith? Thank you, man, for supporting the show. I do greatly, greatly appreciate it. Yoda, we didn't get a BJ in Vegas, but we still got something to look forward to. Go Bills and FKC. As long as the Bills win and it's Bills against, I'm not kidding you, I don't care if it's Eagles or Commanders. I really don't. I really don't care. I would like it to be Commanders. I'm not going to lie to y'all. But as long as it's not the Chiefs, man. Spur, why ain't Joe Brady a name for the Raiders? I said it today on my walk into work. If you're the Raiders and you were interested in Ben Johnson, why would you not be interested in Joe Brady? It's kind of almost the exact same thing. Young offensive play caller, has worked with young quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, has worked with guys like Josh Allen, and has really kind of remade his name in NFL circles. I mean, I can remember a few years ago where I was like, I would hire Joe Brady to be the head coach. This was when the Raiders hired Josh McDaniels instead, and I had a lot of people coming for me, but I was like, if you can find that next young guy, it can kind of help you get that ball rolling a little bit. But I'm with you. If I was the Raiders, the candidates that I would try to bring in that we have yet to submit an interview request for, Joe Brady would be one, Liam Coen would be another, and Brian Flores would be another. Steve-O, what up, man? It is what it is. Just tired of this constant turnover bull crap. We'll be fine with Dodds, Carroll, Saleh. I don't want another retread head coach. I mean, if you just said we'd be fine with Dobbs, Carroll, and Saleh, I mean, you're picking two retread head coaches in a way, right? In a sense. But to me, Dodds, you said Dobbs, Ed Dodds, Pete Carroll, Robert Saleh, that is a outstanding trio of coaches right there. Let's go to Captain. Ben played Brady and used them to get more money out of the Bears. No QB and bad roster. He was never coming here. And I don't even know if that's necessarily true. It could be true. And, it's something that we talked about 2 weeks ago, and it was a report that Diana Rossini put out where she was like, don't be surprised if Ben Johnson puts two teams up against each other and creates a bidding war. I'll try to find the tweet, but she put a message very similar like that out into the circle, and maybe that's what Ben Johnson did. He's trying to get the hype around the Raiders, to get the Bears to get a little bit nervous, and now all of a sudden he goes to the Chicago Bears. Sounds good to me, man. 10 Commandments. Do you think not having the number one pick affected BJ? I do. And I'm not saying it was the determining factor, but when you have NFL reporters that are saying the bottom line, the biggest reason why Ben took that job was because of Caleb Williams and the quarterback, you have to wonder. I mean, if the Raiders have the number one overall pick, I think Ben Johnson takes the Raiders job. I really, really do believe that, because then even if, you don't want a quarterback, you can end up trading out of that pick, and the amount of draft capital that you can get and the amount of just extra bodies that you're going to be able to build around for the long term, it can really, truly help you out. But I think it's foolish for people to say that the Raiders beating the Saints and the Jags had no impact at all. I think there is a bigger possibility that the Raiders winning those two games did, in fact, impact Ben Johnson's decision than it didn't have any impact at all. That's just my 2 cents, though. But who knows? Maybe Ben all along was just only in on Caleb Williams. Liam Coen, Spytek, or Dion? I mean, one of these is a GM. 2 of them would be head coaches. If I had to pick from what you've just given me here, I'd go Liam Coen and John Spytek. Let's go to Big Bossin. Mike McCarthy is a winning coach. You're right, he is a winning coach, and he's got a winning record. His record is like just over 600, and there's not a lot of coaches that can say that. McCarthy is a damn good head coach, and the way that I would talk about McCarthy is the same way that I talked about Vrabel, where people might say retread. Oh, people are like, oh, that guy failed. I think Mike McCarthy, when you look at the shit he had to deal with Jerry Jones, it's way worse than anybody's ever had to deal with when it comes to Mark Davis. But I think when you also look at how many of those Cowboys players wanted McCarthy to stay, that is a very telling statement. But McCarthy's a top 32 head coach. Like, there aren't 32 people alive that I think could manage an NFL team better than Mike McCarthy. Like, Mike McCarthy or Pete Carroll, I would take Mike McCarthy over Pete Carroll. Let's go to Jarrett Watson. Let's go get the Sanders family. It's the only way we're going to get a quarterback. And this can't be the right mindset. And I always say that teams got to be like water. And I hate when people are like, Mitch, who do you want the Raiders to get a QB? It totally changes based on who you hire a head coach. Like, if the Raiders went out right now and they hired a guy like John Spytek, or you go out and you hire a guy like Ed Dodds, and then you get a head coach, somebody, let's just say like a Todd Monken, you're telling me right now you wouldn't be interested in Todd Monken working with a guy like Jalen Milroe? And I know Jalen Milroe struggled this past season. But Jalen Milroe with a guy like Nick Saban the year before looked pretty damn good. Looked like a quarterback that easily could have gone in the top 10. And when you see these QBs that can use their legs, Josh Allen was a project. Jalen Hurts was a project. Jaden Daniels looks like he's that guy. Patrick Mahomes looks like he was that guy. But there are projects that happen all the time in the NFL, and I would take a chance on Monken and Jalen Milroe. But I'm not taking Jalen Milroe if you're going to give me Joe Brady, right? Like, it just always changes. But to just say the only way we're going to get a QB is to bring in the entire Deion Sanders family, that I think is a bit of a stretch. Guevara, we need at least spam FBJ. If there's one thing I'm never going to do, I'm never going to say F a BJ. Let's go to Rusty Coat. Wisdom and experience can be short-circuited. Pete has forgotten more than most people know. We need someone to build and pass to another winning is contagious, which is why I think this Pete Carroll idea is interesting. If you are somebody that is a believer of handing the torch, and instead of bringing in a brand new regime, you can hire a guy like Pete Carroll, who's 73, hire a guy like Robert Saleh, and say, hey, when Pete's ready to hang him up, Robert, you're just going to get the new gig, and you're going to promote from within. It could be an option. What up, Raiders? If not BJ, who, Pete or Deion, who would I want out of those? If I had to pick between Pete Carroll and Deion Sanders, I probably actually would pick Deion Sanders. And it's just based on the information that I've been given around Pete Carroll. I would be excited for both, but I would be excited for both of them from a football standpoint the exact same. The only reason why I would choose Deion is because of the money it would bring in for the Raiders and the money it would bring in for this show and the amount of money and eyeballs the silver and black would get from a national standpoint. Because the way the NFL works is this. They try to find out ways to make money. And that's what's the most important thing to Roger Goodell in the NFL. The Raiders would be making so much money with Deion. I think that the NFL would try to figure out ways to get the Raiders on more primetime games, get them in bigger game situations. Because I know this, if Deion's in a playoff game, it's shattering every record out there. I just saw ESPN had 32.7 million viewers in their Chiefs and Texans game, the most ever on ESPN. That record gets shattered if Deion is a head coach of any NFL team. And the NFL cares about money. So I think that they would care about being relevant with Deion and the Raiders. Aaron Glenn or Robert Saleh, next head coach with a very strong OC, should be our next move. Glenn's not going to get the gig. Glenn's either going to go to the Jets or he's going to go to the New Orleans Saints. I think Saleh can be a good head coach. I really do. I think he got put in a really shitty situation with the New York Jets. I could see Robert Saleh being a Dan Quinn, where had to maybe lose his job, had to learn for a little bit. I could see Saleh, if he had to learn to be a DC for another year or two, but could be a good head coach. I mean, Saleh and Kubiak would be a great regime. I would be in on Kubiak to the Raiders because what Kubiak was able to do with Derek Carr's first few games, that was interesting. And, yeah, I mean, if we have the inside track, Chugs is related to the Kubiaks. I don't know if y'all know that. Let's go to Sir Chai. I need a sip here. Look, Raiders can't hurt me. I survived Jamarcus Russell. If you survived Jamarcus Russell and if you've survived these last 20 years, Ben Johnson going to the Chicago Bears is like me flicking you in the back. You felt it. It hurt for maybe a split second, but let's move on here. Rubio, thoughts on the Raiders getting Notre Dame head coach? And what are the 3 head coach candidates that would still make you excited? I need hope. Again, why would Notre Dame head coach leave for the Raiders? There's a lot of college jobs that are better than NFL jobs, and I think that that's one of them in this instant. I would say the 3 head coach candidates that I would want would be Liam Coen, Todd Monken, and then if I had to throw out another name, the Pete Carroll one is interesting because if they build an entire regime, like if I get the Pete Carroll regime, I would say Pete. If it's just Pete and I don't get the regime I want, then that changes. If it's Dion, it could change a little bit. My top 2 guys I want, though, are Liam Coen and Todd Monken. I could also say Brian Flores would be interesting. Never been a head coach and knows he was going to be fired in 2 years like the rest. We need to focus on players. Won't matter what the coach is in the squad. See, I think the problem with what you're saying here right now is you're not saying anything that's true. And I know it's the way the Raiders have operated, but whoever the next Raiders head coach is, to Itchy, I don't know if this is your real name. I hope it's not. But I'm going to give you something that you can scratch. They're not going to fire the next guy. Like, whoever they bring in next, he's going to be the dude for the next 3 years guaranteed. Like, I'm just telling you that right now. And one of the reasons why I could see them going with Pete Carroll is if it is bad, it's an easier handoff then to move on from Pete, and then you just give Robert Saleh the keys to the car instead of having to go through the whole process again and having to bring in a brand new head coach and having to pay somebody again. Like, I could see them giving Pete Carroll a 2-year deal and saying, hey, after 1 year, after 2 years, you're gonna move on, and Saleh's gonna take over. Chris, tank for Manning. If you're willing to tank and be bad until 2027, that's your call, man. Sal, nope, not gonna do it, Sal. I knew you were gonna be on today's show, and I knew you were gonna be pushing for Gruden. Can't do it. Don't lose your head, nation. We got options, and we do have options. And like the Raiders have done things the right way, and that's really important. The Raiders haven't done things the right way the past 2 hiring cycles. They are doing things the right way this cycle, and that should give you hope. Coach Prime is a winner everywhere he goes. Plus, he'll come with Shador as a package deal to win-win. To me, the package deal with him coming in as Shador, with Shador is, it's the bigger thing there to look at. And he has one everywhere he's gone. But if you're just looking at college resume and college resume alone, I mean, let's face it, Deion Sanders doesn't have a top 10 coaching resume. He's done a great job at Colorado, and he's done an unbelievable job flipping that program, no doubt about it. But if I showed you Coach Prime's resume and what he's done from Jackson to Colorado, and I put that up against 10 other, college football coaching resumes, I don't think Sanders is the one that stands out. The only reason why Sanders stands out is because his name is Sanders. He's done a lot of good. If he does what he's doing for another 5 to 6 years, then I think he's earned his stripes. Christopher, Lincoln Riley, Brady, Kingsbury, and Minter. Lincoln Riley I think would be fun. Joe Brady I think would be fun. Cliff Kingsbury would be fun. Minter would be fun as well. My only concern with a lot of the names that you brought up, I do fear, are they built to be NFL head coaches, or are they built to be NFL offensive and defensive coordinators? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think Joe Brady is good, but Joe Brady as an OC I think is probably a better fit. Cliff Kingsbury, I don't think Cliff is a leader of men, but Cliff is a great offensive mind, which is why I wanted the Raiders to bring him in so much as an OC. To me, if you're the silver and black, you got to get that leader, but you also really have to get a good coordinator. Raiders 1175. Thank you, Kevin Rogers. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame's head coach. Love y'all. I think I've answered this one enough. I think the Notre Dame head coaching job is better than the Raiders head coaching job, just because of, security, if you will. Got a little bit of Raiders news here to get to. The Raiders just completed their in-person interview with Giants assistant general manager Brandon Brown. So, again, just somebody to, keep an eye on. Gavin, to be honest, we're just living off the post, and the Bears also get their stadium full of home fans. We finally have to get our act together. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised that people want to come to Allegiant Stadium. We shouldn't be surprised that people travel to Las Vegas. Like, when the schedule comes out, if I were to show my fiance the Raiders' schedule, right, and if I were to say, hey, or let's say an opposing team's schedule, and if you're going to pick one game to travel to, you're telling me you're not going to go to Las Vegas? Like, that's why that stadium gets packed.
It's like if you're a Raiders fan and you're going to an away game, would you rather go to the Dolphins or the Browns?
You're going to go to Miami, right? Like, and that's a thing. And it's also a new stadium. It's also a beautiful stadium. Like, I know a lot of people that want to go to the things that they've never been to. And there's a lot of those old fans that are going to Allegiant because they've never been there, and it's Las Vegas. F it, Gruden, Carr, Adams, Mack, run it. I don't know if I've ever seen a worse idea in terms of a super chat. Mr. Zahn, so which offensively minded coaches are still out there to look at? Based on the ones that the Raiders have submitted interviews for, Todd Monken. So again, the names that the Raiders have now considered, or at least like officially are linked to the Raiders. It's Steve Spagnuolo, Todd Monken, Robert Saleh. Technically, the Raiders also interviewed Riverboat Ron, which I think that was just, to get the Rooney Rule satisfied. Pete Carroll, not much of an offensive-minded guy. To me, the top-minded head coaches offense-wise, Liam Coen, Todd Monken would be the names that I would call. Sal, watch Gruden come back. Carr comes back to be a bridge quarterback, and we draft the QB. Devontae comes back, watch. Max would be ecstatic. I don't think he would. I think if Gruden came back, if Carr came back, I mean, why am I going to pay Derek Carr $30 million to be a bridge QB? Like, I think that's a bad idea. I think, honestly, if that happened, Max would demand a trade. Players get paid. Doctors get paid. Who works for free? I don't know if this is a riddle, but I worked for free for almost a whole year, so I guess me. Johnny Rader, Brady will work his black magic and get this done. People want to work with Tom Brady. We're going to be able to build a good overall coaching regime. Like, there's still a lot of good coaches out there. There's still a lot of good pieces out there. Yeah, we didn't get Ben Johnson. But what if Ben Johnson wants to just run the show just like McDaniels did and not listen to anybody out there? Because nobody's smarter than everybody. And that was my biggest concern with Johnson, where I wanted it to be a collective unit. Everybody talking gets to make a decision instead of one guy being like, it's too bad, it's my decision. That's never a good thing. Lionel, Brocky Bow Wow is the best thing to ever happen to this organization. I think you mean Brock Bowers. I was going to say, I don't know if you mean like Rocky and Bullwinkle. I don't know where we're going. Not a bad nickname at all. Brocky Bow Wow. Brock Bowers is a great thing to happen to this organization. Noah, I'm a Milroe believer, so hoping for that, get whatever coaching staff to build around him, because I don't believe we will get a quarterback like Shador or Cam. And we might not, right? Like, I do think for a lot of the people out there, like when you watch the playoffs this year, I do wonder if some of these running backs are going to get paid again, because Saquon has made a really solid name for himself. Derrick Henry obviously really helped, that team get paid. James Cook and what he's been able to do for Buffalo. Like, there is a part of me where, you bring in a Todd Monken, you go best player available, and maybe you draft an Ashton Genty. You pair that with a Jalen Milroe. Maybe you get him in the third round. You buff up that offensive line in the draft a little bit. You buff up that offensive line in free agency a little bit. You try to win in the trenches, and You just go out there and you establish a running attack with an athletic quarterback and a great running back on a cheap deal. Like, there's a lot of different areas that we can go. But I am a Milroe believer depending on the offensive coordinator. Like, if you put Jalen Milroe with a guy like Luke Getsy, if you put Jalen Milroe in an offense that would be run the same way that a Shedeur Sanders offense is going to run, you're going to struggle. You got to do what smart GMs and head coaches do. They have the talent, and they build around that talent in the best way possible. Magic City, stop underappreciating everyone that does something positive for this organization while clamoring for these outsiders. Raider Nation is sad, and this channel is the embodiment of the real problem. Well, thanks for the $10, but I don't really know why you say that, though. I feel like we try to, speak positivity into the world. I'm sorry that you think that, but thanks for the donation. Should we try to trade for Tomlin? No, the Steelers aren't going to trade him. The Bears tried to trade for Tomlin last week, or at least picked up the phone and called, and the Steelers hung up the phone right away, and Tomlin said, don't waste your time. Alan Rader, did you guys get my first super chat? Probably. It's just we have probably close to 60 racked up, and I want to say we actually already read it. Raider817, what coach should we avoid or would you be upset with? I would say the coaches I'd be upset with legitimately would be like Vance Joseph. If we hired Vance Joseph, I would be upset. I wouldn't be upset with Steve Spagnuolo because I think if you're trying to recreate what the Commanders did, maybe Spags, you take him away from Kansas City. And the Chiefs are winning football games because of that defense right now. But I would say out of the candidates that the Raiders have shown interest in, the only ones that I would be upset with are, they did also technically interview Ron Rivera. So Ron Rivera and Vance Joseph would be the only names that I would sit up here and go, man, that was bad. Martin, how about Coach Prime with Shedeur? Makes a lot of money. It would definitely make a lot of dollars and cents, but would it actually make sense? So Robert Saleh is getting a second interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and honestly, that's the team that I could absolutely see hiring Robert Saleh. Like, real talk, that's a team that I could see going with Saleh. I really do believe that. Rubio, Tom Brady as GM. Kinda. He's going to be operating as a GM of some sorts. Midnight Raider King, I now would like to interview Prime. If anything, to see what his plan is for his staff would be, which of his points are very key. I would bring him in.
I hate to break it to you, Midnight. I don't think you'll be allowed to interview him.
Midnight, if you want to interview him, go for it. But if I'm the Raiders, I would interview Deion Sanders. I would. Why would you not? And I say that simply because unless they have no interest whatsoever in Shedeur Sanders, if the Raiders have no interest whatsoever in Shedeur, I would find that shocking because of how much Tom Brady has worked with them. But Deion has already made it obvious. Deion wants Shedeur to be a Raider, or else Deion would have never said, I'm interested in the Raiders' job. Will, was cool crawling out of the darkness of being a Raider fan the last few days. Back to it, I guess. And I don't want this to be the mentality. Like, I think the Raiders' offseason is more fun than the regular season. And, I think you got to celebrate the wins when they come. You got to, talk through the losses when they come. But I wouldn't say I'm going to go hide away. If anything, this is the time where the nation needs to stand up and say, your voice is heard. Like, our voice can be loud together. And if you don't think Mark Davis watches this show and Mark Davis doesn't watch a lot of Raider shows out there, you're wrong. He's a businessman. And he watches what people say about his team, about his money. And it's just a fact. Ventrac, this year's MVP, not disappointed because it seemed unlikely to me. We have no QB. That had to be the deal breaker. And it was the deal breaker. It was reported that it was the deal breaker. Let's go to Magic. Let's go Magic. AP wanted to keep Jacobs and draft Daniels. Instead, he's given the worst offensive NFL roster and a new GM, yet he kept players playing hard. Out of the news, and y'all support his firing is delusional. I support his firing because AP wasn't good at his job. And I think you not realizing that makes you a little bit delusional as well. I'm upset that AP got fired because I wanted AP to work. And I know AP wanted to keep Jacobs. But paying a running back like Josh Jacobs more than 4 years, $48 million, with the roster that our team had, would not have made any sense. Jacobs would have been bad behind this offensive line. Jacobs would not have put up nearly the amount of numbers that he put up in Green Bay. And I know that he wanted Jaden Daniels. It's just they were unable to go out and get him. I know they wanted Cliff Kingsbury. They were unable to go get him. But, like, you have to look at what Antonio Pierce did when he was the Raiders head coach based on the coaching decisions that he made. He did not do a good job. And you can improve. Why would you not try to improve? Did the guys play hard? Yeah. But if you're making millions of dollars and you're not playing hard, like, it shouldn't take Antonio Pierce to have that team playing hard. And also, them playing hard was against horrific teams. They played hard against the Jags and they played hard against the Saints. Two really bad football teams. They also played hard against the Chargers in that last game and got their shit absolutely pushed in. Love you, Jeremy. Look what NFL did to the Texans. I mean, that was one of those officiating games. And don't get me wrong, you can't put everything on the officials. The Texans did not play a good game. But it's really, when you look at the hits that guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts are taking on a weekly basis, why aren't they getting calls? They're star quarterbacks. It's clear. Patrick Mahomes gets calls that nobody else gets, and you can't tell me that that's untrue. You can't tell me it's untrue. You said the Michael Jordan rule? It kind of reminds me, I mean, you're a James Harden guy. It reminds me when James Harden that one year, it was just like he got more calls than anybody I've ever seen in my entire life. And yeah, and I get it. Sometimes you got to earn your reps a little bit. But if you can honestly look at me in the eyes and watch an NFL game and tell me that the Chiefs don't have an unfair advantage because of the NFL officiating, I think that that's delusional. Why not pursue McCarthy, experienced head coach and better play caller than Kellen Moore? Dak's numbers were better with McCarthy, will not be spooked by Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, or Sean Payton. I think that this is a good idea. I would pick up the phone and I would call Mike McCarthy. I think McCarthy deserves an interview. Like, I would have McCarthy as one of my top candidates if the Raiders decided to at least give him that interview. Like, I think you'd be foolish not to do it. Drake, this just happens when you get your hopes up. And, you know, that's life sometimes, man. I think, but if you're a Raiders fan and you're going to, leave today and you're going to go hide in a dark hole, that's not the mentality. There's been way worse things. This isn't even a top 50 thing that I think has happened to us this year in terms of my heartbreak. Don't you think coaching a doomed non-Windy City team contributed to success as an OC? He coached in 15 dome games this season. You're not wrong. I do think that coaching in a dome, the offensive numbers do look a lot better. I think also when you have an offensive line, the way that the Lions have an offensive line, it allows them to do a lot of the things that they have. I'm curious to see what Ben Johnson looks like with Caleb Williams. No doubt about it. What's up, Asst? A hard head makes a soft ass. Kingsbury said, kiss my ass. And now, Ben, I hope this sears in like a hot iron. Raiders against the world. Damn the NFL. Wise Pete Carroll, Mr. Shotgun Pass out of the goal line. I think you're just talking about the slant route from the one Super Bowl, and that's why you're talking in caps right now. I don't know. I don't know what you're going with here. Patrick B., we might have a GM that we really want, and he may have a head coach he really wants. Ben Johnson may not have been the guy. Johnson was the guy, and I think that they would have hired whoever the GM Johnson wanted to bring in. But you're not wrong in the idea of the name that I think the Raiders want at GM is John Spytek. And because of the John Spytek connections with Tom Brady is why I think Spytek could honestly end up getting that job. And yeah, maybe Ben Johnson was like, I don't want Spytek. I only want this guy. And the Raiders like, that's not the guy that I want. But to me, Ben Johnson was the higher priority over any GM that we're interviewing right now. What up, Desi? I almost bought the sauce with Johnson, but yet again, another Raiders letdown, and the season isn't even over yet. At this point, I'm not getting excited until we get better. Point blank, period. Just get better. I'll say this. I'm going to celebrate moves that I think the Raiders have gotten better. If you're just going to wait till the season and say, I'm not going to get excited about these moves until we start winning, it's going to be a long off season. It's going to be a long year, and being a Raiders fan is going to be really difficult. But you can go back. I mean, look at what the Commanders did in free agency last offseason. I remember sitting up here on the show being like, I love what the Commanders are doing in free agency. And they signed a shit ton of players to bring into this new regime. You can flip the script in one offseason, and I hope that the Raiders are able to do it. What up, Sal? Tom Brady in more shock right now than when... Actually, I don't know about that one. Ryan, I get Pete Carroll was a good resume, but he is not the future. Why waste time with a 70-year-old head coach? Also disappointed in Hondo, Vinny, etc. reporting. And I don't think that you should be disappointed in Vinny, and I don't think that you should be... Again, I'm not really following what Hondo's saying because I think Hondo's more of he just gives opinions and says that it's reporting, where Vinny's been right just way more often. And I think that there's a lot of people that are shocked, but there's a lot of people that are shocked around the NFL. But also, like a lot of the things that Vinny and Hondo were being told, you know, these are guys like Schefter and a lot of these other guys are out there talking about it. And there's a lot of stuff that I was also being told. So, like, I hear your first part about Pete, and I don't think that you should look at it as why bring in somebody that's 70. It's not a long-term option. I think for somebody that wants a long-term option, you should look at Pete Carroll as a bridge where Pete's going to help set that foundation for a year or two, build a culture, something that he is very good at, and then whoever the Raiders bring in as OC and DC, they're going to be that next person to take over when Pete decides to, you know, hang him up. But that DC or OC would be a very good name. What's up, Anthony? Why aren't we calling Eric Bieniemy? The Raiders, I don't think, are going to hire somebody with a domestic violence past. If you don't know the Fred Belindikoff rule, go look up the Fred Belindikoff rule, but the Raiders have a clear zero tolerance for anybody that has domestic violence in their past. And I know it was many, many years ago, but Eric Bieniemy, you can look it up, does have domestic violence in his past. What up, Sincere Evans? And he's got a lot more on top of that. Pete Carroll and sign Justin Fields. I do think Justin Fields is a possibility. At $10 million, maybe on a one-year rental, Fields to me is an upgrade over somebody like Aiden O'Connell. However, though, Aiden O'Connell at $1.2 million as a bridge is not a bad option either. Let's go to Luke. What up, man? Like, you wanted to hire Todd Monken? Then Justin Fields is absolutely a name I would try to bring in. Because you can make an argument Justin Fields is the best runner with the football at the quarterback position. Runner with the football is the clear word there. Luke, I'd love to see us look at Marcus Freeman. You can look at Marcus Freeman all you want. The Notre Dame job is a better job than the Raiders. Better job security, probably gets paid more to do it, and you're the face of a program. I know that we think that college coaches and going to the NFL is a better gig. Some guys love staying in college, and Marcus Freeman's going to be one of those dudes, man. If you're looking for last-minute tickets and that lowest price guaranteed, speaking of Marcus Freeman, if you're trying to get tickets to go to the Natty tonight, Notre Dame and Ohio State, honestly, this would be kind of the time when I would start to look, where the game is, about 2 hours away at this point. This would be the time where I would download the GameTime app, and I would start looking for tickets if I was legitimately trying to go. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime today. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code CHATSPORTS for $20 off. If you're wondering what time is it, it's game time. Though if you do go to the GameTime app, you got to check out the GameTime picks. This is going to help you get the best ticket prices, and it's not going to make you waste time looking through a bunch of ticket prices out there. Do the all-in pricing. Click on the GameTime picks when you download the GameTime app. Whether you're trying to go to a football, baseball, basketball game, GameTime is all about bringing people together in 2025 and creating those lasting memories. That link's down in the comments. It's in the description of today's show. Huge shout out to GameTime for sponsoring the Raiders Report. Personally, I would love Josh McCown. See, the Josh McCown hype, I've heard a lot of really, really good things about McCown. And I would compare McCown to somebody maybe like a Kellen Moore, where I want McCown to get a few more years underneath his belt. But the way people talk about him as just being like this great dude who knows a lot of football, I'd be more interested in this as like a QB coach OC situation, not a head coach yet. What up, Aggressive? The hot chick at school used us to make the guy she wanted jealous, and it worked. Like manipulative charm. We got sucked in, numb to this shit. And I don't think that this is 100% accurate, but I also don't think it's 100% false, where I think Ben Johnson was trying to put the Bears and the Raiders against each other to get into a bidding war. But really what it came down to was, I would say, instead of to try to get the guy that he wants, I think really what it came down to was there's a girl and she's dating two guys. And there's two guys. The one guy she loves very much, he just doesn't have money to spoil her. And then she looks at the other one, and the other guy's got a brand new car, a beautiful house, and she wanted the brand new car in Caleb Williams. Like, the one guy was able to provide a gift up front in that car to the car keys. I think that's the biggest difference. What up, Luke? At this point, give AP a call. And at this point, I don't even think AP would take the job again. Why would you go back to the team that fired you? And to me, I would rather the Raiders bring in. Let's face it, AP was a failure. Let's just leave it like that. Steve-O, I messed up. GM Dodds, head coach Carroll, DC solid. Correct. I think we already answered this one a little bit earlier. Under the radar OC, in your opinion, Mike LaFleur. If they tried to do something like this, the reason why Mike LaFleur is the name I'll throw out there is because Robert Saleh is best friends with the head coach for the Packers, LaFleur, and Shane Waldron's another very interesting name. He was just fired by Chicago, but Shane and Pete Carroll did a great job in Seattle. But Mike LaFleur doesn't call offensive plays with the Rams. That's Sean McVay's job. He could be the offensive play caller for the Las Vegas Raiders, and because Saleh and the LaFleur family are like this, that would be my under-the-radar name. What's up, Aaron? How you feel about drafting Jackson Dart? I don't love it. I don't think he's a long-term option. If you want to have him learn for a year or two, cool. But to me, Jackson Dart's not really somebody that I think has NFL starting caliber ability. Lost, I expect nothing, and I'm still let down. I expected Ben Johnson to be the head coach, and I am let down. But now, to me, we just got to move on. And now you get to look forward to the Raiders head coaching search again. It just might not be the hype around Johnson. What's up, Misty? With BJ gone, should we consider Patrick Graham for the head coaching gig? You could. It's just not going to happen. And I think Patrick Graham is outstanding. And I think he is an outstanding coach and will be a head coach in the NFL at some day. But as much as I love PG, I do think the Raiders getting Graham would be a little bit of a settle, where if you wanted to just hire Patrick Graham, I think Patrick Graham is more qualified than Antonio Pierce ever was. Nick, man, I'm disappointed, but only 1 in 4 brand new head coaches actually work out well. So who knows? It could be a good thing. Who's up to be next? If I was a betting man, it'd be Pete Carroll. Sir Chai, it's still the nation, so excited for 2025, and I'm with you, man. There's no way that even if Ben Johnson ends up going to Chicago that I'm not going to be unbelievably excited for this offseason. I still think this is going to be the craziest offseason of all time. To me, the Raiders losing out on Ben Johnson now tells me that they got to go even more balls to the wall in free agency. You got to do more crazy shit for trades. You got to do more crazy shit in the draft. If you're looking for an entertaining offseason, I can make an argument that the Raiders missing out on Ben Johnson means we are going to have a more interesting and entertaining offseason. We need a big-name coach for the next 5+ years. Monken and Coen doesn't excite me going against Peyton, Reed, and Harbaugh. I want Dion, Pete, and Tomlin. That's like saying that, people were saying that type of shit, though, a few years ago about Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVay. Sometimes you do have to hire that new and up-and-coming coach because he can turn out to be the guy that, beats a lot of those names out there. But I hear what you're saying. Raiders fans always trying to get back with their toxic ex. That's I don't know if there's ever been a more true statement. Patriot Raider, who is better, current AOC or 2019 Jimmy? Jimmy went to the Super Bowl with a super team, built a super team with AOC, make $1 million, get Joe Brady, Saleh, worth a shot. The only reason why I'll say that Jimmy Garoppolo is better is because of all the experience and all the regimes that he played in. But if 2019 Jimmy Garoppolo can make it to a Super Bowl, why can't AOC? And Chug said it. They also had Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan, to me, is one of the best scheme designers, head coaches in the game still. Yeah, like Chug just said, if Brock Purdy went to another team, he'd be way more average. If Kyle Shanahan came to the Raiders and worked with Aiden O'Connell, I do think there's a chance they could make the playoffs if they build a super team. The obsessive gardener, Mitch, who do you think the Raiders will most likely hire now? If I was a betting man, it's Pete Carroll. If I got to sit down and say, Mark, these are the names, Liam Coen and Todd Monken would be the names I would want. Zach, Toothless Wonder, that's a hell of a name. Zach Bowman, hire Monken, draft Genty, draft Milroe, sign Fields to compete. I like this idea a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, if you want to go a cheap option, and I'm talking build in the trenches in free agency, build it like on the back end of the draft with some of these other picks that we need, you can get Genty in round 1. You could get Milroe probably in round 3 at this point, sign Justin Fields to a cheap contract, and that would be a perfect regime for somebody like a Todd Monken. That I agree with you there. I think you could compete with that. It's just you have to really hit on a lot of other pieces out there. Get McCarthy, get Justin Fields, let's freaking go. I think Mike McCarthy would do a good job with Justin Fields as well. Ortiz, sign Fields, and hope for some good in the draft. We got to hope for good no matter what, whether it's free agency or the draft. I thought it was just red light, green light. Family, hire Pete Liam as OC assistant head coach, pass the torch when Pete is done. This is an idea that I would sign off on. Geomex, if Gruden can somehow become 12% part owner and tell Davis to go fly a kite on Everest, we may see the Raiders become great again. If there's one person that I want to be less, like, I think Mark Davis is better than John Gruden at owning a team, managing a team at this point. Gruden sucked, guys. Why are we still bringing him up? Pete Carroll plus Joe Brady and Liam Coen as future head coach. We need a quarterback who's poised and with legs, a quarterback with wiggle that can still look to pass, quarterback with an arm to throw a late pass, or when DBs have eyes at QB, it's Cam Ward. I think Cam Ward with Joe Brady, Cam Ward with Liam Coen, Cam Ward with any of those names would scare a lot of people. Again, I like Cam. He's the number 1 quarterback in this year's draft to me. Eric Castro, love the Super Chat fam, but we need to stop listening to Vinny and Hondo. Raiders insiders are wrong way too often. Just like they said, we were signing Fields and got Minshew. Again, and I always try to say this, and I get worried when I say it because I think people think that I'm knocking on these guys. You got to take Raiders beat reporters with a grain of salt. And that's just the fact, man. But it's because of all the changing parts that this Raiders organization has had. It's hard to get sources when everything is changing as much as what it is. So Spytek is the GM for sure now. No, I never said that. I have simply given my opinion on that. I think John Spytek is the most likely candidate because of his ties to Tom Brady. But if I was a betting man, John Spytek, Ed Dodds would be my top 2 names. John Dorman, why are we shocked? Schefter literally said on the McAfee show last week, the Bears were very much in play for Johnson, and he didn't get the Raiders hype. I know Schefter said it, and there was a lot of speculation, but I think also Schefter's the guy where he doesn't put emotion into it, and he got pretty emotional when talking about the Raiders, but there was a lot of moving parts there, right? Like, there was a lot of things. Schefter also, I think, Schefter's been wrong on the Raiders in the past. Mike Garafolo the other day, he was wrong on the Raiders, right? Like, I think there was truly a lot of missing things going on and a lot of things working behind the scenes. And I also think it really just came down to Ben Johnson. Like, Ben Johnson made a decision. Antonio, Mitch, am I positive about our team flipping the script here? Bring in Spytek and Coen, and let's build our team the correct way. Your thoughts? To me, if you brought in John Spytek and Liam Coen, you could be a winning organization in 3 years would be my goal. Christian Lloyd, head coach Pete Carroll, bring in Will Stein and draft Gabriel and Nash. No, thank you. Let's go to Cax. Why isn't Bruce Arians not being brought up? He retired. It was a name that I actually had on my Raiders head coaching candidates video the very first time that I did it, but Arians still technically works with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But based on Arians' comments in the past, I don't think that he's interested in coming back and being a head coach where Pete Carroll is. Raiders 187. We need stability. Whoever we hire needs to stay. And it's going to happen. Whoever the Raiders hire next will have stability. It's very important for the Raiders, and it's very important for a guy like Max Crosby because that's something that he wants, no doubt about it. Did we get through all the supers? Chug said we just got through basically, I want to say all the super chats there, or go get Sanders at least. It would be fun to watch. Sanders would be fun, and the Raiders are going to be very aggressive this offseason. So here's the one thing. Chugs and I are going to get ready to get on out of here. If you haven't already, make sure you click that like button. I would love to be able to get to 1,000 likes here. It just tells me that you guys appreciate the content that we put out here all the time. Let's face it, today sucked, no doubt about it. But if you want to hang out with Chugs and I, and if you're like, you know what, I need to put a smile on my face, I need to have some fun, we're going to have some fun tonight's watch party. Ohio State, Notre Dame. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're ready to pull up. I'll probably be going live in about an hour and 10 minutes. So I'll be back here in another hour and 10. We'll talk about the Raiders yet again. We'll talk about everything going on. Ohio State, Notre Dame. To Steve-O, your super chat, how can we get Liam Coen as assistant head coach and OC? You wouldn't get him as assistant head coach and OC. You would only get Liam Coen as a head coach. And then Quinn Williams, I won't be surprised if Tom Brady goes after Byron Leftwich. You could go after Byron Leftwich as an OC, not as a head coach candidate. Again, he hasn't worked in the NFL since 2022, was the OC for Tom Brady and there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but not going to be a head coach. And Patrick Graham is about to get a second interview with the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's another one to really look at closely. The three names, according to Schefter, Liam Coen, Robert Saleh, Patrick Graham, are the top three names for the Jaguars head coaching job. A lot of names out there. I'll be back here in a little bit. Ben Johnson to Chicago. Hopefully it works out for Ben. Hopefully it works out for the Bears. But hopefully, no matter what, it works out for the Las Vegas Raiders, and whether they hire Pete Carroll, whether they hire whoever, we will be back here live on this show when that news ends up happening. I just think the ball's going to be rolling quickly, and I would say the Raiders will probably have a new head coach named, I would say, by the end of the week would be my projection. Ohio State, Notre Dame, see you guys in a little bit. Ben Johnson,